I helped my coworker move into his new apartment. Then he sent me the bill for the movers. We're friends. You should cover your share. I refused. He sued me for $800, so what did the judge ask? I still remember the exact moment Alex knocked on my door. 2 cardboard boxes stacked in his arms, and a hopeful smile on his face. It was just past 8 on a Saturday morning when he stepped onto my welcome mat and said, "I scored this loft on Baker Street, and I could really use an extra pair of hands." I set aside my mug of cold brew and answered, "Sure thing. What time does the moving crew show up?" He unloaded the boxes one by one onto my front porch and replied, "They're coming tomorrow morning. Today I need muscle for the small stuff books, lamps, fragile things." He paused, then added with a half grin, "I'll owe you big time. Maybe I'll hit you up when I throw my next barbecue." I laughed, shrugged my shoulders, and said, "Sounds fair. Just point me toward the pizza and I'm in." Inside his apartment the floor was scattered with empty packing peanuts and bubble wrap. He handed me a Fox wood picture frame and said, "You want to hold on to this? It's my favorite band's poster." I caught it by the glass edge and replied, "I've got it." When I stood up I felt the weight of his record collection box in my other hand. He nodded at the stack and said, "Those are all mine, be gentle with them, okay?" I smiled. "No worries. I treat vinyl like fine china." We worked side by side in easy silence for a few minutes, stacking books into labeled cartons. Then he said, "You ever thought about swapping your couch for a sectional? I've got 2 moving blankets you can borrow." I shook my head. "I like my couch where it is. But thanks." He lifted the blankets off the back of his sofa, folded them neatly, and tossed one to me. "In case you ever change your mind." By 11, we'd made steady progress. He leaned on his dolly, wiped his brow, and offered me a can of soda. I took a sip and asked, "Need help with the fridge?" He nodded and said, "Yeah, that thing's a beast. You good with shifting heavy stuff?" I set the can down, felt the cool aluminum against my palm, and replied, "I've moved my fair share of refrigerators. Let's do it." We rolled the fridge across the wood floors, the wheels creaking in protest, and I must have jostled it wrong, because he winced and said, "Careful man. That thing's new." I slowed, repositioned my foot, and said, "Got you. Slow and steady." He smiled. "Teamwork, right?" I grinned back and said, "Teamwork." At 1 o'clock we paused for lunch. He pulled 2 sandwiches from a paper bag, handed me one, and said, "So tomorrow the heavy crew shows up at 9. I was thinking we split the cost 3 ways, me, you, and Carl. Sound good?" I blinked, sauce dripping on my shirt, and asked, "Split it how? I thought you were covering all the movers." He shrugged and said, "Well, I'll handle half. You cover a third, Carl covers the rest." I swallowed hard, wiped my mouth, and replied, "You mean I pay about $266? He nodded, chewed a bite of sandwich and said, "Roughly. That way it keeps my budget in check." I set the sandwich down, thought of our easygoing morning, and said, "I don't remember agreeing to that. I thought today was just helping you move for free." He brushed crumbs from his lap and said, "I mentioned it yesterday when we were unpacking the albums." I searched my memory, no such mention, but I nodded and said, "Okay. If that's what you need." The next afternoon an email landed in my inbox titled, "Mover Invoice Swift, Moves & Co." I clicked it open to find a detailed breakdown: 2 men, 4 hours, a subtotal of $1,600, taxes included. Payment due upon receipt. Beneath it was a bold line reading, "Yo you are Shar, $800. I stared at the screen, the afternoon light fading behind my curtains, and thought of our conversation over sandwiches. I replayed every word, realizing nothing I'd said had committed me to that amount. I drafted a reply. "Alex, thanks for sending the invoice. I enjoyed helping you pack. I'm surprised by the amount. I thought you were covering the crew. I didn't hire them or sign any agreement. Please clarify." He responded within minutes. "No need to be surprised. We're friends. I covered the other half. My budget is tight. Please send payment by Friday." I closed my laptop, laid my head back on the pillow, and felt the first drop of uncertainty wash over me. We had spent hours moving his lamps and books, laughed over record albums, joked about borrowed blankets, but nowhere had I promised $800. The next morning I texted him, "I'm sorry man. I didn't agree to split the mover cost. I can't pay without a contract." His reply came 2 hours later. "Fine. I'll see you in court." At that moment, I realized a casual favor between friends had escalated into something neither of us anticipated. And I knew the coming days would test more than just my wallet, they would test the very foundation of trust that had brought us boxes, tape, and laughter on a quiet Saturday morning. The summons arrived like a thunderclap on a clear morning. I stood in my kitchen with the paper trembling in my hand, reading Alex's complaint for the 3rd time. Defendant agreed to split moving company invoice. Defendant failed to pay. Emotional distress and inconvenience valued at $2 to Court costs and fees. 5th point. Beneath it, the scrawled date gave me exactly 2 weeks to respond. My stomach churned as I remembered our last exchange. I had thought his, "Fine. I'll see you in court" text was an empty threat, a flare of anger that would die out by Monday. Instead, he turned our casual favor into a lawsuit. I reread his email. "We're friends. You should cover your share. I can't afford the full amount." He'd phrased it like a joke, but the invoice he sent was deadly serious. I dialed his number and waited through 3 rings before his voicemail picked up. I left a calm message. "Alex, I received the summons. I'd like to discuss this before it gets worse. Call me back." The line went silent, and I realized he had no intention of talking it out. At work that Monday, I tried to ignore the summons anxiety, but the moment I walked past the coffee station, whispers rose around me. A colleague paused mid-sip and said, "Hey man, sorry about the, lawsuit thing." I forced a smile and replied, "It'll all sort itself out." In truth, my chest tightened every time someone mentioned the mover case. By mid-morning, my calendar pinged with a new HR appointment. I entered the small conference room to find our HR partner, Dana, already seated, clipboard in hand and a neutral expression on her face. I closed the door, sat down, and she said, "I've been informed there's a conflict between you and Alex over moving expenses. We'd like to mediate before the court date. Is that okay?" I nodded and said I was open to mediation if Alex was. She tapped her pen and replied, "I'll reach out to him. Please come back if you have any other concerns." I left, feeling both relief and apprehension. That afternoon I emailed Alex. "Dana from HR will contact you for a mediation. I hope we can resolve this before court." His reply came less than 5 minutes later, "No thanks. I'm proceeding with the claim." He added a single frowning emoji. It felt like a slap. I typed back, "Doesn't have to be adversarial. We can settle. Split or waive based on agreement." Then I deleted the draft. There was no point if he refused. I realized I'd have to prepare my defense. Over the next few days, I gathered every piece of evidence I could find. I printed our text messages, which showed him promising to cover all mover fees, until I asked about splitting costs at lunch. I printed my bank statements to prove I had never paid any mover company. I even found his Facebook post on moving day where he thanked all my amazing friends who helped haul these boxes, tagging me and 3 others. That post, timestamped at 20:15 p.m., contradicted his claim that he'd asked me to pay. I organized everything into binders labeled texts, emails, social media, and financial records. Each binder felt heavy, a physical weight representing the absurd escalation of a simple favor. At the office, I confided in my closest coworker, Jenna, over lunch in the empty break room. I explained how I'd gone from helping him carry lamps to being sued for $800. She listened, eyebrows furrowed, then said, "He can't be serious. You never agreed. This is petty revenge." I nodded and said, "I wish it were that simple." She squeezed my shoulder and said, "We'll support you in court." Her solidarity eased the knot in my chest. I realized I wasn't alone. On Friday afternoon, I received a terse email from Alex's lawyer copying me on a motion for default judgment if I failed to respond by the deadline. The lawyer wrote, "You must file your response by 5 p.m. today or judgment will be entered against you for $850 plus interest." My pulse jumped. I logged into the small claims portal, completed the formal response form, and uploaded my evidence binders as PDF exhibits. I wrote a concise statement. No contractual agreement existed. Plaintiff's claim rests solely on mistaken assumption and informal friendship, which does not constitute a binding contract. I submitted just minutes before the deadline and exhaled as the confirmation screen appeared. That evening, I met Jenna for a walk in the park to clear my mind. She asked if I feared losing. I said, "I think the law is on my side. But he's weaponizing the system against me." We walked under the lamplights as she said, "This will blow over. People will see the truth." I hope she was right. Under the hush of the trees, I realized how volatile mixing personal favors with financial claims could become in a world where every casual conversation could end up in a legal document. By Monday, I was back in court. Alex arrived with a friend in tow, his expression cold, as though he'd relished the spectacle. I carried my binders, Jenna's supportive smile in the gallery seats, and a quiet confidence that the facts would prevail. When the clerk called my case, I followed Alex into the chamber, heart steady. The stage was set for the decisive moment that would determine not only $800, but the boundary between friendship and contract in a world increasingly governed by paperwork. Monday morning arrived with an electric charge I could taste in the hallway as I approached the small claims courtroom. My heart beat steadily, but my palms felt damp. I carried 3 binders stacked in my arms, via texts, emails, social media, and tucked financial records under my elbow. Jenna walked beside me, her presence steady and unwavering. We filed into the waiting area behind 2 rows of chairs, occupied by people disputing everything from unpaid rent to pet damages. When my name was called, I stepped forward, set the binders on the front table, and took my seat opposite Alex, whose shoulders squared like a soldier preparing for battle. He didn't glance at me. Instead, he handed a manila folder to the clerk, then slid into the chair with an air of triumph. The bailiff opened the session with a gavel tap. Case 24 SCC 1372 Carlson vs. Morris, she intoned. Alex's lawyer rose first, producing a printed copy of the Swift Moves invoice. He recited the basic facts: 2 men, 4 hours, 1,600 total, defendants shared at 800. Then he declared, "My client firmly believes that Mr. Carlson agreed to split these costs. Despite requests for payment, Mr. Carlson has refused, causing undue stress and financial burden." The lawyer paused as though expecting applause, but the judge merely nodded. When the lawyer sat, I stood. I felt every eye in the room shift to me, some sympathetic, most curious. I opened Binder 1, text and read aloud our key exchange. Alex's message at 12:17 p.m. on moving day. "Tomorrow the crew is 9 a.m. I'll cover all. Just help today." My voice echoed in the wood, paneled chamber. I passed the printed text across to the clerk, who accepted them without comment. I moved to Binder, emails, flipped to the June 5 email where Alex thanked all my awesome friends who pitched in today, tagging me explicitly. I quoted the email timestamp, 20:15 p.m. and emphasized, if I had agreed to pay movers, why would he publicly thank me as a volunteer? The judge's pen scribbled along the margins. Alex shifted in his seat, muscle twitching beneath his shirt collar. His lawyer rose again, trying to undercut my points by arguing that public gratitude didn't negate an oral promise. He produced a transcript of a casual after-lunch conversation. "I'll owe you big time, maybe split the later cost. You in?" The lawyer claimed it proved my agreement. I sighed inwardly, then turned to Binder 3 social media, slid to the printed Facebook post, and said, if this remark had actually happened, why did Alex post at 2:15 p.m. thanking me for free help? And why was there no follow-up comment about splitting costs? I placed the post before the clerk. The room was silent enough you could hear the judge's desk clock tick. Alex's face went pale, his confident posture had crumpled. His lawyer frowned, rifled through papers, and finally sat back down with a stinging look. I took a breath and addressed the judge. "Your Honor, the evidence shows no contractual commitment on my part. Friendship and gratitude do not substitute for written or explicit agreement. I volunteer my time without expectation of payment." Alex rose then, voice shaking slightly. He pointed at me and said, "You never said you'd cover the cost. But you didn't object when I mentioned it. You're just using semantics to avoid paying your fair share. You took advantage of me." I felt a flush of frustration but stayed calm. "I never concealed anything," I replied. "I asked for clarification before anyone ever saw the invoice. I offered to discuss, but Alex refused mediation." The judge leaned forward and asked Alex, "Did you document any agreement? Email, text, signed estimate?" Alex's throat bobbed as he swallowed. He shook his head. "No, Your Honor." The judge turned to me. "Mr. Carson, did you ever sign anything relating to these movers?" I answered, "No, Your Honor. I simply helped a friend move without contracting or payment discussion." She nodded, tapped her pen, and after a final glance at the binders, she said, "I find in favor of the defendant. The plaintiff has not met the burden of proving a contractual obligation. Case dismissed." A hush fell over the courtroom, broken only by the soft rustle of paper as I gathered my binders. Alex sat frozen, eyes downcast, as the bailiff instructed the clerk to enter judgment. Jenna squeezed my shoulder as we exited. I felt relief in every breath, but also a pang of sadness for the friendship I'd lost. Outside, the summer sun felt sharpened, almost celebratory. In the weeks that followed, rumors of my courtroom victory had a different effect than the initial lawsuit. Colleagues began to send gentle reminders when grouping expenses, often copying details into team chats and shared documents. The finance department adopted a policy requiring clear written agreements for any group, subscription, or service hire. The irony was not lost on me. A dogged attempt at vindictiveness had sparked a new culture of transparency across our company. Looking ahead, I believe this era will be remembered for how personal disagreements collided with digital records and legal expectations. As we move deeper into the 21st century, our social and professional systems will integrate automated consent tools, transaction logs, e-signatures, AI prompts that prevent such misunderstandings before they start. What began as a dog-blood dispute over boxes and bubble wrap became a blueprint for future collaboration: clarity over convenience, mutual respect codified in writing, and the understanding that true friendship thrives when obligations are stated as clearly as they are freely given. When the internal newsletter featuring my unexpected office lessons story circulated, it felt like a gentle breeze stirring old tensions into new shapes. Within 2 days I received messages from colleagues sharing their own misadventures with split cab rides and shared lunch tabs. One teammate confessed she had repeatedly billed half of a group gift to the wrong person, until our new policy made her double check. Another offered thanks for reminding the team that a quick text confirming details could prevent awkward disputes. I appreciated their openness, and replied to each note with a brief acknowledgement, feeling the office culture shift from guarded to collaborative. Yet despite the positive feedback, I noticed the seat across from mine remained empty when Alex's day passed. The projects we once co-led were reassigned to other pairs. His desk, once a messy island of notebooks and coffee stains, now sat cleared and waiting for a new occupant. I wondered if this was a consequence of our court case, or simply the natural ebb of work assignments. But it left me with a quiet ache where camaraderie had once lived. One Tuesday afternoon, the head of HR invited me to lead a panel on ethical collaboration in the modern workplace. I agreed, picturing a room of 30 to 40 people, rather than the auditorium of 200 that formed on the evening of my presentation. On stage, I shared the chronology of my dispute with Alex, the Saturday move, the red, highlighted invoice, the summons, the courtroom binders, and the final judgment. I presented our new request and confirm template, and explained how it became embedded in our intranet. I emphasized the importance of turning informal promises into documented agreements. The audience listened with polite attention, and I saw heads nodding when I described the moment the judge asked for a contract. Afterward, colleagues lined up to share their relief that small claims court need not remain a threat over split expenses, and to ask if they could adapt our process for mentoring stipends and conference fees. My manager appeared at the back of the hall, offered me a thumbs up, and said, "You turned a feud into progress." I smiled, recognizing that turning adversity into policy was a rare achievement. That night, I walked home beneath streetlights, thinking about the strange trajectory of a simple favor. I felt the Sunday after our panel's success, and I decided to check in on Alex. I drafted a short email. "Hi Alex. I hope you're well. I noticed our desks are now separate and wondered if you'd like to meet for coffee and clear the air. No expectations, just a chance to close this chapter." I stared at the screen until the blinking cursor went bold. Then I deleted the message. Even in victory I felt uncertain whether reaching out would soothe old wounds or reopen them. Instead I closed my laptop and walked through the empty streets, the hum of traffic a reminder that life moves on whether we patch every rift or let some remain as reminders of what happened. The next morning, I found a handwritten note slipped under my office door. It read, "Thanks for the panel. It helped me." No signature, no explanation. I considered that Alex might have written it in a gesture of reconciliation, but it could have been anyone moved by our conversation. I placed the note in my drawer and went to check the shared drive where our templates lived. A new folder named Beyond Movers appeared, containing sample forms for group travel bookings, event catering, and even shared software licenses. It was created by someone in the operations team who had attended the panel. Seeing the folder, I realized that our conflict had rippled far beyond Alex and me. It had seeded a new culture of clarity that would grow in unexpected ways. Looking ahead, I believe this episode will be remembered in company histories as one of the first small disputes that led to systemic change. In the next decade, I expect enterprise platforms to embed consent and agreement modules directly into collaboration tools. Before a group orders lunch, books a venue, or hires external services, a brief prompt will record each participant's acknowledgement. Time-stamped and auditable, but unobtrusive. Smart contracts will handle micro payments automatically upon completion of tasks or receipt of goods. These innovations will prevent the kind of bitter showdown Alex and I experienced, where friendship was positioned as a binding contract in a courtroom. Instead, it will preserve goodwill by capturing consent in real time, ensuring that favors remain acts of generosity rather than seeds of discord. And as I sit at my desk each morning, sipping coffee and clicking through our shared templates, I carry the conviction that transparency and empathy can coexist when technology supports both.